Hey folks, it's Jeff Nyquist, and I'm here with Italo Lorenzo. Italo, how are you doing?
Hi Jeff, I'm fine. I think we can begin. Most people in the chat are questioning, okay, what is Trump revolution? Why it's over? And did Trump let us down? So I think we can start by explaining to these people what is the Trump revolution.
Well, the Trump revolution was the promise of Trump. Trump was the guy who was going to build a wall and solve our immigration problem. He was going to fix our trade deficit by equalizing, balancing our trade with China with new treaties. He was going to come up with new treaties, bilateral with all these countries that are killing us with lowering their value of their currencies and whatnot. He was, of course, he was going to support the working man in America, get us manufacturing again, and get the economy back on its feet with those money-making things that produce good jobs for people. Not that a guy's wife has to go to work and he gets to stay home with the kids. Because there's no manufacturing job for the guy. There's the job at the school or the job at the hospital for his wife, but there's nothing for him because the country's become a gigantic, it's an old people's home and it's a school. That's all that's left here in America is we all go to school or we all go to the hospital. Uh, you know, uh-oh.
It's a big retirement community.
Yeah, that's right. We're getting old, and then the immigrants are coming in, and of course, it's his other promise was they weren't going to keep settling Muslim immigrants, and I think I saw the statistic that they're settling more than before. Uh, that the wall is not going to be built. He's not pushing for the wall anymore. In fact, he's making deals with the Democrats. He's this DACA thing. He's going to back down on that. I think. And of course, he promised. Hillary Clinton said no-fly zone in Syria. We're going to confront Russia. And what is and of course we don't want more of these wars in the Middle East. And Trump says, yeah, I'm not going to start another war in the Middle East. We'll fight ISIS, but we're not going to confront Russia and we're not going to bomb Syria. What does he do? He bombs Syria. I mean, on some of these really big issues where Trump was representing a change, all of a sudden we find no change at all. And clearly, Trump was a salesman. He knew how to sell himself to the voters, but he doesn't understand the political issues himself. I think that's quite clear now. I think the guy that was sort of credited as the architect of his election was Steve Bannon, and Steve Bannon was fired last month. Steve Bannon is gone. I know conservatives. We've had Diana West on the show, and she's told me before Steve Bannon is the heart of it. If it's got to be Bannon is the guy that's going to make a difference. And it's true. The conservatives, one by one, he's just turned his back. All the Trump loyalists and conservatives, they're just being one by one kicked out of the White House, not welcomed in the government. It is the victory of the old establishment, of the old liberal establishment, the permanent government.
And why do you think that Trump is cutting his communication with this kind of people, Steve Bannon and the conservatives? Why do you think he wishes to get in touch with the establishment and not the conservatives?
Well, of course, there's a problem. The conservative movement, Trump really split the conservative movement because what we have in America is probably similar to what you have in Brazil. You have the Democratic Party, which has really been taken over by Marxists and by post-Marxists, post-structuralists. Who knows what they are? I mean, you've got. I just heard a blog from a woman who was a longtime activist in the Democratic Party, and she says there's these Russian speakers, there's these Russians running around, behind the scenes, and I'm thinking, well, that's right up my alley. That's something people would expect me to say. But she worked for the Democratic Party all these years. I tried to to get her to maybe do an interview, but she wouldn't talk to me once she realized who I was. Um, but because I think she's still on the left. She just doesn't want to be on that left. But the thing is I think Trump being a salesman, what we have in America is that all of the Republicans, and this is what we've had, we had the Tea Party movement, and they got all these Republicans elected to Congress because briefly the Congress belonged to the Democrats. In 2006, off your election, the Democrats won both houses of Congress, and President Bush couldn't get anything done that he wanted done. And then, of course, Obama came in and had this advantage, but he lost it because the Tea Party movement put in Republicans. Well, the problem is that the Tea Party movement is demoralized in the United States because the Republicans, most of them, they sold themselves as conservatives. They get into Washington and they go, oh, wow, I can make money for myself. I can play this game. I can be somebody, I can, and so the power structures in Washington, which are liberal and socialist, that have been built up, they are able to intimidate people. They're able to give opportunities to people. They're really more in control. And that when people get there, they lose their courage to stand up for their convictions, for the principles on which they said they wanted to be elected. And they find it much easier to get along and go along with these structures that have been put in place over the last 3 decades. When Ronald Reagan was elected president, there was the illusion that he had changed things. But in reality, those structures were building themselves up throughout the Reagan years. And there was largely the Republicans and the conservatives who were fooling themselves. It's the party of self-deception. And the ultimate self-deception was when the Soviet Union collapsed, thinking that it was the end of the Cold War. And now we're finding out that was a huge self-deception because Russia and China are really well armed. They're waiting for us to make a strike on North Korea, in which case they will attack us because we have started World War III and we're the bad guys. So, I mean, and luckily the US intelligence and military at least know that. And I think they've been able to dissuade Trump from preemptively striking North Korea. I mean, it still could happen. But now the problem is that South Korea has elected a lefty, right? And that guy is talking to the North Koreans. He wants to talk to them. And what do the North Koreans want? They want the abrogation of the US-South Korean military alliance as a precondition for a kind of confederation unity of North and South Korea. So there's convergence on communist terms. Right there, there's the first country that is likely to converge with a communist country on communist terms. And we can't say anything about it because there's a question of whether we can defend them from Russia, China, and North Korea now. The renewed communist bloc. So Trump is, the fact of his being ignorant and the fact that he must depend on the left power structures. And he's talking to Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer in the Senate. I mean, they're the minority. The Republicans control the Senate and the House, and he's gone to the minority. I mean, this is bizarre. This is bizarre.
Do you think this is a strategy Trump is adopting? Not saying that it is a good strategy, but it has to do with the problem he's having with the Republican majority in both houses. Like, okay, if you don't give me what I want, I will start to talk with your rivals. Do you think this has to do with it?
Yes, it does. It does certainly have to do with it.
So why do you think that despite of the fact that he has the majority of the two houses, it doesn't seem to make his life any easier?
No, his problem is he doesn't get along with people in politics. If you look at him, I've been watching him the whole time. Of course, we all knew a year ago, before the election, we knew there was something wrong with the guy, right? I mean, Hillary Clinton was horrible, and we had to vote against her, and we had to support Mr. Trump in the hope that he was going to do something. Maybe he was our guy with the personality disorder, that his disorder somehow advantaged him, that it somehow gave him a leg up because he could say these nasty things about people, right? And you go, wow, that's really nasty, but it's true, right? So you think, well, maybe speaking truth to power. It's kind of weird, but let's go with it. The problem is that he can't govern that way. He can't govern being nasty to people. He has to get along with people. He has to be, politics. It's interesting. There's been some articles about this. Trump has what you call a disagreeable personality, right? He's got a high level of disagreeableness. And people, if there's one other U.S. president, President Andrew Jackson, is rated by historians as having this high disagreeableness as a personality. Well, Andrew Jackson was a U.S. president that fought all these duels. I mean, he killed people in duels. If you insulted his wife, he'd pull the pistols out and they'd be shooting. He walked around with lead in his body, from taking bullets in duels. They called him Old Hickory. High disagreeability. I think when he left office, he said something to the effect that, that he wished he had hung the vice president and the secretary of state. He wish he'd hung him on the end of a rope or something. He was a really crazy guy. But the people loved him. He was a populist. He spoke up for the common guy. Well, of course, the Old West, that was a different era. I suppose you could be that way. And I thought maybe that could work if he was smart, if he was, sly like a fox. But with Trump, he's just plain, I think, there's something, I saw Sam Vaknin's piece on YouTube on Trump, and Sam Vaknin wrote the book The Malignant Self-Love, which is about narcissism. And the malignant self-love, he says, look, Trump is a malignant narcissist, and here's the evidence that he's one. And Vaknin is sort of like the expert on it, because Vaknin is a malignant narcissist who confronted his malignant narcissism, which is really rare and difficult to do. And he describes the interior life that the key to understanding Trump as president is that Trump's narcissism leads him to believe that he's great already and he knows everything. He's omniscient and omnipotent. And anyone who disagrees with him is stupid, and he doesn't have to learn anything. He doesn't have to learn a thing. And if a person goes into the White House thinking that they don't have anything to learn, they're in trouble because there's a whole huge learning curve. I mean, you look at President Bush, and President Bush was a guy who wanted to do the right thing and had this big learning curve, and he had all these problems, but he learned. But it's a shame because he couldn't have a third term because he learned so much. But he at the end he said, yeah, he understood Putin, he understood Russia, he understood China, he understood the war in the Middle East, but it was too late. He had to go. He made all these mistakes, but he had to go. So yeah, it's with Trump, Trump will never learn.
Yeah, I think we all hoped during the campaign that this kind of personality that Trump was showing was actually him being a salesman and not his actual self. And I think people kind of hoped that okay, he appears to be the crazy guy. He calls CNN fake news, and he wrestles with CNN and that video, and he says that Hillary should be in jail. Should he be president? But it turns out that he actually is this crazy guy. He is this narcissist guy, and I kind of feel that this explains why people like Steve Bannon are leaving the White House, because okay, they know that he doesn't know everything, and they maybe try to teach him, and this is not agreeable to him.
Right. He's not going to be agreeable to be learning anything, and anybody that's going to tell him anything, he's immediately offended and he has to put them down, because any suggestion that he's not omniscient is an insult to him. And so he has to return the insult. So this is a guy, by the way, people like this can be manipulated by those who understand them. And I think that the generals around him are very I mean, I've heard there's been stories out of the White House that he has insulted, Mattis, and he's insulted McMaster, the national security advisor, and these other Pentagon generals that are, and Kelly, I mean, he's chief of staff as a general. But you see, the interesting thing is generals are very tough. They're very tough people, and they believe in obeying orders, right? So the reason I think that Trump has surrounded himself with generals is because generals are people who obey. They basically obey. They're obedient. And and they have to swallow whatever guff you give them. So Trump can be rough on them, and they have a higher level of stick-to-itiveness from their military training. They're not going to quit when you've raked them over the coals for the wrong reasons. They're going to stick with it. Because of the nature, in the military, they train you to take a lot of abuse. What do you do in boot camp? Your sergeant's yelling at you, "Get down on your face, worm, and give me 20." That was the line I heard when I was in boot camp. Yeah, you're a worm and you're awful and you're horrible and give me 20, and now you're going to get some punishment, and now clean the latrine with your toothbrush and now brush your teeth. No, they didn't go that far, but anyway, so yeah, that's what he's kind of stuck with, because everybody else is going to leave. Everybody else is going to leave him. And he's going to be isolated. And of course, when you've totally destroyed all your relationships, now you have to move on and destroy more relationships, right? So he's meeting with Pelosi and Schumer, but he's going to blow them up too. He's going to blow himself up with them too. I mean, he's going to make the rounds, and then, everybody's going to go, "No, thank you. We'll wait until he's not there anymore," or they'll all impeach him, because now he's in a position to be impeached by both parties, because now both parties have gotten a whiff of him and nobody can work with him. And I don't know what they're going to find, but that report is still coming. The special prosecutor's report is still coming. And last I heard, they were focusing on the fact that he had these real estate deals with people, this motorcycle gang, for example, called Spetsnaz, these Russians that are connected to Putin. They're really Russian mafia, I suspect, and they're laundering money through real estate deals they're making with the Trump organization. And technically, it's a crime if you facilitate a real estate deal with a crime people that they're laundering money. You're also culpable, because you didn't do your due diligence. Whether you did it from negligence or whatever, you're still breaking the law technically. So they might be able to take him down on that. I mean, that's what I understand. The last thing I saw they were working on. So, I mean, Trump always had these shady characters, around his organization, in his organization, but he himself is basically just a con artist. How did he make his millions? Because he's brilliant? No. Because he'll say anything to anybody, and every deal is, you give me money. And he gets paid up front in every deal. That's how you get rich. If you won't, and then he'll actually, drag something through court so everybody loses millions of dollars unless he's paid first. So even when he's sued, he wins, because he figures out a way to get paid. So he's all about money. The man is all about money. And he's shameless. So yeah, of course, he's made money by being a bull in a china shop. But in international affairs, he's dealing with people who have military establishments, and they will bomb you and they will wreck your military. And the U.S. military is not ready for war. We've had 4 years of sequester cuts under Obama. The Navy ships are crashing into merchant ships and killing sailors. Uh, they don't have everything up to speed. They don't have the training. They lost a lot of their best people that they needed in the Navy and the Air Force because they couldn't afford to keep them. And of course, with all the political correctness, a lot of people left the military under the politically correct military of Obama. So is the US military what it once was? I don't think so. And they know. I think the leadership of the US military knows they have problems they have to sort out before they can engage in any kind of war with a top flight power like Russia or China. So
So yeah, it's very difficult for a man who is used to make trade deals to start dealing with people who doesn't care about money unless it's the means to an end. I think
mhm.
that's very he finds himself in a very different scenario than the ones he is used to
That's
be.
very
And
true.
yeah,
Yeah.
so okay, go on.
Yeah, in fact, to underscore that, one of the, his big thing has been, his stupid thing has been from the beginning that he was going to get China to fix North Korea for us. And now they're threatening China with basically getting rid of, uh, 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 how do I say it, uh, uh, eliminating China's ability to use the US dollar international payment system. And people are saying this is an act of war if we do this to China. It is incredible that we would that this president would even suggest that be, but this is what's being suggested. And I've read a few things about it. It hasn't been discussed as thoroughly, I suppose, as it's going to be. Maybe it's just a trial balloon and they're not going to do it. But this passage of sanctions on North Korea, talk of a blockade, they're gonna it has to affect China because China's just going to end run any blockade of North Korea. You know,
Mm,
so
yeah.
and so I suspect is Russia. So and Russia already has sanctions, of course, kind of silly sanctions, but still sanctions. So none of this is going to be effective. And South Korea is going to probably seek to make its own deal with those countries. And the U.S. is losing its hold on Asia. Asia is going to flip. Country after country is going to join the Russian-Chinese alliance. They're going to leave ours because we can't protect them. We can't offer them anything. And making economic threats to China. I mean, that's like putting a gun to your own head and pulling the trigger, right? I mean, we've already gotten into bed with China and we've gotten ourselves in this position where the Chinese are dominating us trade-wise. I mean, you have to extricate yourself from that very slowly and carefully if you don't want to cause a massive global economic calamity by doing that in the wrong way. And threatening Chinese banks is not the way to do it.
Mhm. Yeah, China already has most of the industry that had left to US. So
Mm-hmm.
if you threat China, how come we get industrialized goods? You have to build up a new industry out of nothing, out of thin air.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's it will not work, as you said.
If if we crash the Chinese banks, the Chinese will destroy the dollar. It will be mutual assured destruction, economic destruction. It's like what? Why would you do this?
Yeah,
You might as well
and,
drop the bomb then.
yeah, we wouldn't need the bomb if that happened. That would
No.
be enough. So, if we are talking about impeachment, Trump's impeachment, it's a possibility, as you said. Uh, we have to talk about Mike Pence. How Mike Pence stands on all of this? Is he relevant at all?
Well, not while he's vice president. Sort of the joke in America is the most irrelevant political office holder in the United States is the vice president. you know he's practically invisible. It's like they send him to funerals overseas that the president doesn't want to attend of dead foreign leaders and stuff. I mean it's no, I mean Mike Pence is a sort of an establishment Republican who's in bed with the usual suspects. So people, I mean, it's this corporate Republican thing where they got plugged into Chinese money. They're owned by the Saudis and the Chinese, just like the Democrats. And goodness knows what Russian influences are on both parties. I mean, it's the communist thing. It's the whole communist thing, communist bloc thing. I mean, we're totally infiltrated as a society. As Trevor Loudon would point out, we have not been vigilant about the infiltration of our political system by our foreign enemies, and they've gotten quite far. And I don't know what Mike Pence is going to be like a president. I think he would be much more steady. I mean, when you look at Mike Pence, you feel calmer just hearing him, right? I mean, he's intelligent. He's very intelligent. He's very calm. He's reasoned. He creates confidence by the way he speaks. I think he would be obviously a much better president. There's no doubt. I mean, it would be an advantage. And if the Democrats are smart, they'll oppose impeaching Trump. They'll want him for the full 4 years.
Yeah. Probably. Yeah, Mike Pence looks. He sounds much more sane, much more.
Oh yeah.
He sounds that he has a much brighter view of the situation. But if he doesn't have the perfect scenario would be a president, or at least a better scenario would be a president with Trump's guts and Pence's sanity. But we don't have that.
I keep getting calls here. Sorry about that. I should have turned my phone off.
That's okay. It's okay. So we have now the scenario where Trump already bought the bait on Syria, and now he's probably going to bite it in North Korea.
Well, I don't know, because South Korea now, which initially, they were very scared of this North Korean aggressiveness. Mm-hmm. But I think the fear sunk into a point where they realized the U.S. wanted to do a first strike, or was contemplating, I should say, a preemptive strike on North Korea, because the North Koreans frankly crossed our red line. Our red line was you start testing ICBMs that can hit the continental U.S. And here they've tested, I think, 3 of them in the last 2 months, last month and a half. They've tested 3 of them, and that the U.S. would react to that, because all the agreements we've made with North Korea have been that you don't develop these weapons. You don't develop nuclear weapons. You don't develop ICBM weapons. And we've given the North Koreans money and food and kinds of assistance for them not to do this. But of course, they used the assistance we gave them to do that. So, I mean, we got cheated again, like we always do. So now we're mad, and now, of course, but the thing is, we need the bases in South Korea to launch a preemptive strike. And what the South Koreans want is they're talking about having us put tactical nuclear weapons in there to defend Seoul against the artillery that's massed against the city. And of course, it's very tempting for the South Koreans to try to make a deal on their own and to break with the U.S. In that case, Japan would have a very difficult decision to make, because then it wouldn't be Japan and South Korea and the U.S. It would be just Japan and the U.S., and the U.S. having failed to properly deal with the situation. So what does Japan do? So you see the beginning of the unraveling. You've got the Philippines ready to flip and join China already with that crazy man in the Philippines. So you start to get an erosion. Then Taiwan goes next, and then Singapore, and then pretty much it's a done deal. The Far East becomes part of the greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere, and it's all Beijing. So, and that's very wow, it's very remarkable. But
Well, so in a scenario where there is a preemptive strike on North Korea, do you feel like a certain degree of certainty that the Chinese and the Russian will respond to that preemptive strike?
Yes, in fact, what I've heard is that our intelligence is certain that they would respond now. I mean, you had a week ago, Monday, Vladimir Putin evacuated the Russian civilian population from the border area with North Korea of Russia. Why did he do that? Because Russia was moving in missile launchers into the area, which,
Mm,
and of course, why would Russia evacuate the civilian population from an area where they were moving missile launchers in? Who is going to give return fire to those missile launchers, right? The
mm,
Americans. So they were preparing, and then they were running air missions. They were sending Russian bombers and fighters over North Korea to show their support for North Korea. And then the Chinese press has publicly said that if we attack North Korea preemptively, that China will defend. China will fight the United States. So you have Russia signaling that they would
mhm.
defend North Korea, and you have the Chinese overtly saying they will do it, and the U.S. intelligence saying, yeah, that's what they're preparing to do. They're preparing to defend North Korea and to fight us if we preemptively strike. And the Russian military is right now at top flight, as ours is at bottom flight. We're weak, they're strong. They're in. If Russia and China want to defeat the United States, the one place they can come together to do it is North Korea. And I think Russia and China, they're very wise in that they have studied their history. And Otto von Bismarck, the great Prussian statesman, said that he did not believe in preemptive wars. He said preemptive wars are always a bad idea. And he says, and the reason he gives is really interesting. He says, because you're starting the war, which puts you in the wrong. And
Mm,
then he says, states cannot engage in great wars without justification to their people. And here, by launching a preemptive war, you've engaged in a war that you can't really justify to your people, because you are always, even if it's your disadvantage, let the other side strike first. Let them. If they're going to strike first, let them do it. Don't strike them first. You're at fault. It's like what Hitler did in Poland. Hitler struck first. Poland and Germany were mobilizing. France was mobilizing. There's some accounts that say that those countries mobilized ahead of Hitler, but Hitler struck first. See, and if he was going to be attacked, he should have let them, because what did he do? He put himself in the wrong. Of course, Hitler liked to put himself in the wrong. He preemptively struck the Soviet Union, right? So who lost the war? Hitler. Why? Because everybody said he's a bad guy. He attacks countries out of the blue. So you just don't do that, because it puts you in the position of Hitler. You're following a policy that wise statesmen have said you don't do. And of course, the Russians and Chinese, they don't want to start the war. They want us to start the war. So all these provocations in North Korea are to get this easily provoked man, Donald Trump, to start the war. But the South Koreans are so scared, they don't want to let us use their bases. Now, we could do it without South Korea. It'd just be more difficult. We'd end up doing it in October. And they could still do it, but it's iffy. It's very iffy now. Whereas it looked before like, oh yeah, I talked to people in Washington. They said, we've got to do it. We've got to preemptively strike them. And I'm thinking, are they crazy? But that's what people were thinking. Now, of course, it's like, can we do it without South Korea? And the South Koreans would go against us, because obviously they don't want all that artillery to open up on their biggest city, Seoul,
mhm.
which would become the face of the moon. You could understand it. This is where the threat of doing terrible things by the communists, by the North Koreans, is so effective. It's so effective that they've managed us, they've manipulated us, they've boxed us into a political corner, and to where they can exploit the situation now politically. It's
Mm,
really intriguing to see
yeah,
it unfold this way.
yeah. But let me think. The Strategically speaking, it's not clear to me yet. I know that there is the political effect of you not initiating a war, the political effect the political advantage it gives you, in this case, China and Russia. But are they doing this to justify the war to their own people, because it's a very odd, very weird to think like that in Russia and China, because okay, they are not democracies. They don't act theoretically. They don't have to care about what their people is thinking.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm my reason
Yeah,
is good.
no, but in war they do. You see, in war it's very important that they do. You look at the beginning of look, Stalin didn't do opinion polls. If he thought people were against him, he sent them to labor camps, right? And it turned out the unpopularity of that regime in 1941, at the beginning of 1941, of the Soviet regime was horrific. And here he was about to go to war with Nazi Germany. I mean, I think it's true. The Germans attacked the Soviet Union on June 22nd, 1941, because they believed that the Soviet Union was going to attack them, specifically was going to attack Romania and take the German oil. The Romanian oil fields were 90% of all the oil that the Third Reich relied on for its war machine. And it's fairly close to the Soviet border, the Romanian oil fields, the Plosti oil fields. And even though the Soviet Union was attacked, initially the regime was so unpopular that Soviet armies were surrendering wholesale. And the people were putting flowers on the tanks that were coming, the German tanks. In Smolensk, the people rejoiced when the Germans took the third largest city in Russia. The people rejoiced because they could open the churches again in the country. And then suddenly these people came out, they were still religious. They had been hiding their religion for 20 years. The Bolsheviks had taken it away. In Ukraine, the people were overjoyed. Of course, it turned out the Nazis were not liberators. The Nazis were crazy Nazis, and they didn't, they mistreated the people, and they didn't really free the people. A lot of military experts say that if the Germans had treated the Russians and the Ukrainians with kindness, they would have won the war easily against Stalin. And it was the fact of the aggression and the treating the so what the civilian population, and see, Stalin was quick to realize it. So what did Stalin do? He opened the churches himself, see, during the war. And he called it the Great Patriotic War. He got rid of the communist slogans. And so he won the people over to fighting the war. So popularity of a regime, even a dictatorship, because in a war, people have to fight. And you're giving them guns, right? And they can throw those guns down and surrender to the enemy if they don't want to fight for you, or they can turn those guns against you. So it's very important in a war to make sure your people are on your side. I mean, look at what happened to Hitler when the German officer corps started to turn against him in 1944. They tried to blow him up during a military conference in the July 20 bomb plot. So when having people support you is big, because they can blow you up, they can kill you, they can surrender and not fight for you, or they can turn their weapons against you. So it is important for China and Russia to have their people with them, especially if they're going to war. They need their people on their side. And it's the same in every country, because Napoleon said this best. He said, morale is to power what 3 is to 1, the power of numbers. Okay, you got 100,000 men, but you have really good morale, so it's like having 300,000 men. I mean, this is what Napoleon said. And so if you have really bad morale, it's the opposite. You have 300,000 men, but you only really have 100,000 because your morale is so bad. So, and what is morale? Morale is the people believe in you, is one of the key elements of morale. They believe you're doing what is the right thing, you're doing right by them. And this is the problem in the United States and many Western countries, is that people no longer believe the leaders are doing right by them.
Yeah, there's a problem. We cannot. This is some kind of a paradox in democracy. Olavo is talking extensively about it recently. That you allow an amount of freedom to the people, and of course this freedom is welcome, but at the same time you lose unity. So in one side you improve people's life quality, but in the other side, it weakens the nation in front of Russia and China and this kind of people, because we don't have the necessary unity to fight against this kind of countries.
Yeah, well, one of the things that used to exist in the democratic countries, the United States, Great Britain, France, the leading ones, is that there was a tremendous, whenever there was a threat from outside or even an internal threat, there was a tremendous unifying that was ready to take place. Um, and so that the country could come together very quickly. Um, but that in recent decades, that's changed. Um, and I think it's because uh, really virulent enemy ideological poisonous ideas coming from, I think, enemy think tanks have been brought into our political system, where people have now value other things other than, they've lost their instinct for political unity, for the necessity of coming together as one country. And they value, the environment, or they value the planet, or they value socialism, or they value helping the children, or they value Muslim immigrants more than they value their own country and its unity. So that nationalism has become a dirty word, and the nation state is not important. And so we don't need to pull together as a nation or as a people. And so we are just atomized and disintegrated and unable to function really as nation states anymore. There is an extent to which a country like the United States isn't a nation anymore. It's a picnic. It's a shopping mall regime. And it's not, you look at it, and now, of course, politically, it's a circus. So it's all about entertainment, and it's all about these different causes which divide everybody. And there is no national cause. There is no nation there. There is no there. America, it's like you see this commercial they put on, and it has faces from all over the world, every race and every creed and every religion. And I'm an American. They're all Americans. Well, in other words, it's the negation of being an American. There's no America. There's nothing that unifies us. There's nothing that makes us one people anymore. We're all people, and we all hate each other. It's, it's just the way it is now. I mean,
Yeah.
You saw what happened in Charleston, or not Charles.
If everyone's American, no one's American.
Right. If
Yeah.
everybody's somebody, then no one's anybody. Just like the Gilbert and Sullivan operetta, the comedy, Utopia Unlimited. If everybody's somebody, then no one's anybody is the lyrics of the song. It's just become a joke, and we've fallen into the trap of the idiocy of our own ideological fancies of the moment. We really believe that stuff now. I mean, it's crazy stuff to believe, but we actually believe it now. And of course, it makes us into idiots. It makes our political process a process of self-unraveling. We're just sort of unraveling as a country, as people, as individuals. I mean, it seems like the individual soul is unraveling even. I mean, people don't even...
If you don't have a common destiny to accomplish, if the people doesn't feel like they have some kind of anything spiritual, historical, whatever, to unite them and to define them and to differentiate them from the other people, they are nothing. They don't have identity. They don't have a reason to be together, despite the fact that they happen to be born in the same country. They don't have a reason to be together. Well, Jeff, I think our time is almost over. I'd like to thank you for your clarification to the Brazilian audience about why are we losing hope on Trump. It's very sad, because there was a very, very big there was very much hope on Trump during the campaign, and to see that how he is being swallowed by the swamp is very, very disappointing. But anyway, Thank you, Jeff, for being here with
Thank you.
us. And okay, and you watching us, please like us and subscribe. Okay, very good Saturday for everyone. God bless.